My daughter's fiancé just sealed his fate with 11 words. No, wait. That's not how this story starts. That's how some other man, in some other life, might have begun. My story, my story begins not with a threat, but with a silence. A deep, cold, utterly complete silence. The kind that settles over a man's soul when he's just lowered the love of his life into the earth. The rain was a Connecticut cliché that Tuesday morning. A soft, persistent drizzle, making the already gray skies weep along with us. The air smelled of wet soil, pine needles, and the cloying sweetness of lilies that always seemed to mock the solemnity of death. Eleanor hated lilies. I remember telling the funeral director that, but he just gave me that practiced, sympathetic nod that meant it's too late now. Old man, just go with it. So there they were, a morbid white fence around her final resting place. I stood there, a cheap umbrella doing little to deflect the chill seeping into my bones, even through my best and oldest dark suit. 62 years old, a retired contractor whose hands still bore the calluses of decades of hard work, a face etched with lines from sun and laughter, now just from sorrow. Art Finch, that's what they called me. Arthur was too formal, too much like someone who sat behind a mahogany desk. I preferred the honesty of Art. A simple name for a simple man, they'd say. And for 35 years, I'd cultivated that image. A quiet, dependable husband, father, provider. A man who built things, not broke them. A man who fixed leaky pipes and sagging roofs, not broken lives. Not anymore, it seemed. My kid stood beside me. David, my son, 32, a sharp suit, Boston-bred, an investment banker who always looked like he was about to close a deal or make a nervous call. His jaw was tight, his eyes darting around, not quite settling on the casket. Grief, yes, but something else too. A tremor, a restless energy I'd seen before, but usually after a bad earnings report, not a funeral. Sarah, my daughter, 29, a teacher, delicate and empathetic. Her eyes were red-rimmed, a tissue clutched in her hand. She leaned into me, her small hand finding mine, squeezing. Her grief felt pure, uncomplicated. Or at least I wanted it to be. God, I wanted it to be. The pastor finished his sermon, a bland recitation of Eleanor's kindness, her volunteer work, her love for her family. All true, of course. She was a good woman, my Eleanor. Kind, gentle, with a laugh that could brighten the darkest corner of any room. A school librarian, for God's sake. What secrets could a school librarian possibly harbor? None, I'd always thought. My life with her, our shared history, felt like a sturdy, well-built house. Foundation solid, joist true, roof weatherproof. Now, the whole damn thing was crumbling around me. As the pallbearers, mostly family friends and a couple of my old crew, began the slow, agonizing process of lowering the casket, a low vibration started in my coat pocket. My old flip phone, a relic in this age of smartphones, mostly used for calls from suppliers or the occasional grandkid school. I rarely bother with texts. I pulled it out, almost instinctively, my thumb hovering over the ignore button. The number was unknown, a long string of digits I didn't recognize. Probably a wrong number, or worse, some telemarketer who didn't respect the sanctity of a funeral. But something, a flicker of that old instinct I tried so hard to bury, told me to look. The screen lit up. A single, short message. I am alive. I am not in the coffin. The world tilted. The gray sky above me, the weeping willow, the faces of my children, they all blurred into an abstract smear. The sound of the ropes creaking, the muffled sobs, the gentle patter of rain, it all faded, replaced by a deafening roar in my ears. My heart, which moments ago felt like a lead weight, now hammered against my ribs with frantic, impossible energy. Eleanor, alive? Not in the coffin? My mind, for all its practice calm and years of quiet retirement, snapped into a gear I hadn't used in decades. A cold, surgical precision that cut through the shock. Who would send such a message? A cruel joke? A deranged prank? But the words, they resonated with an icy clarity that felt too specific, too personal. My thumb, trembling slightly, typed a reply. Who are you? The response was almost instantaneous, as if someone was watching, waiting. Can't say. They're watching. Don't trust the kids. Don't trust the kids. My gaze, which had been fixed on a blurry screen, snapped up. I looked at David. His profile was sharp, almost hawkish, as he stared blankly ahead. His hands were clasped, not in prayer, but in a tight, almost defensive grip. Then Sarah, her tear-streaked face, vulnerable, innocent. But my mind, now stripped of its grief-induced fog, began to sift through months, years of memories. Lila inconsistencias, moments primes do dismissa. A hushed phone call, a too-quick glance, a sudden change in plans. Things that meant nothing then, but now. The casket was fully lowered. The pastor began to throw the first handful of earth, the thud resonating like a final, damning statement. But for me, it was no longer a finality. It was a beginning, a jarring, horrifying, undeniable beginning. The woman they had just buried wasn't Eleanor. My Eleanor was alive. And whoever they were, whoever was watching, had played me for a fool. For too long. The silence around the grave was broken not by the rustle of leaves or the whisper of prayers, but by the silent, terrifying question forming in my mind. If Eleanor was alive, and not in that box, then who the hell was? And what kind of game was I unknowingly playing? A game where the stakes were already so high, I could feel the cold breath of death on my neck. The funeral concluded in a blur of handshakes and condolences. Each comforting word felt like a lie, each sympathetic pat on the shoulder a fresh insult. I nodded, I mumbled my thanks, I even managed a practiced, watery smile. Decades of training, of learning to wear a mask, served me well in those agonizing minutes. No one, not David, not Sarah, not even Eleanor's closest friends, saw the earthquake tearing through me. They saw a grieving widower, numb with sorrow. I saw a battlefield newly revealed, and I was just realizing I was standing right in the middle of it. Don't trust the kids. The words echoed in my skull, a chilling counterpoint to the drone of the condolences. I looked at David again. His eyes, though still red, held a glint I couldn't quite decipher. Was it impatience? Frustration? Or something darker? He was talking to old Mr. Henderson, Eleanor's former principal, nodding politely, but his gaze kept flicking towards his expensive watch. Always in a hurry, David. Always chasing the next deal, the next quarter. I'd attributed it to youthful ambition, a drive for success I'd never quite understood. Now it felt predatory. Sarah, on the other hand, still clung to my arm, her head resting on my shoulder. She smelled of lilies and tears. Pure, honest grief. Or was it my mind, now ruthlessly dissecting every interaction, every memory, pulled up instances of Sarah's quiet manipulations, her ability to get what she wanted with a soft word and a vulnerable glance. She was Eleanor's daughter, no doubt, but she also had a streak of her old man's stubbornness, a steel thread wrapped in silk. Dad, are you all right? Sarah's voice was soft, laced with concern. She pulled back, looking into my eyes. I forced another smile. Just tired, honey. It's been a long day. The truth, in its own twisted way. It had been the longest, most bewildering day of my life. David, ever practical, stepped in. We should head back, Dad. People will be waiting at the house. He meant the reception, the spread of cold cuts and casseroles, the forced camaraderie. I wanted nothing more than to escape, to be alone with this impossible revelation. But I couldn't. Not yet. I had to play the part. Had to appear vulnerable, predictable, an open book. Because if they were watching, if anyone was watching, they'd be looking for cracks. And I couldn't afford any. Not now. The ride back to the house in Eleanor's old sedan was strangely silent. David drove. Sarah sat beside me in the back. The radio was off. The rain had intensified, drumming a steady rhythm on the roof. I stared out the window, watching the familiar New England landscape. Stone walls, ancient oaks, clapboard houses glide by. It felt alien, like a stage set for a play I'd suddenly been dropped into without a script. My mind raced, a complex algorithm running at full throttle. I am alive. I am not in the coffin. Don't trust the kids. The words were etched into my consciousness. They tore at the fabric of my reality, shredding everything I thought I knew about my life, about Eleanor, about my family. First, the immediate practicalities. My phone, the message. I couldn't risk anyone seeing it. It was too incendiary, too unbelievable. Reaching into my pocket, I pretended to check the time. My fingers, still calloused but surprisingly nimble, navigated the archaic menu of the flip phone. Delete message. Delete sender from call history. A quick, efficient wipe. No trace. A ghost in the machine. It was a reflex, an old habit from a life I'd thought I'd long since abandoned. Then the questions, layered and complex. If Eleanor was alive, where was she? Why the elaborate charade? And why the hell was I burying a casket that didn't contain her? A morbid, horrifying thought twisted in my gut. Who was in that coffin? A dummy? Someone else? The sheer audacity, the intricate planning involved, it was beyond anything a simple school librarian could orchestrate. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment escape. This was a carefully constructed operation. And that realization, more than anything, screamed of a past Eleanor had never shared with me. A past that mirrored my own, perhaps. And the kids. Don't trust the kids. That was the hardest pill to swallow. My children. My blood. The ones I'd raised, protected, loved without question. Was it possible they were involved? Not necessarily in the plotting, but perhaps unwitting pawns? Or worse, willing participants? David's ambition, his financial dealings. He was always stretching, always looking for an edge. And Sarah, so seemingly innocent, so easily overlooked. An ideal conduit, perhaps, for information or for manipulation. The thought was a venomous snake coiling in my chest. It made me feel sick, but also, strangely, sharpened my focus. The car pulled into the driveway of our old colonial home. The house, usually a beacon of warmth and familiarity, now seemed to loom, filled with shadows and unspoken secrets. Cars lined the street. Neighbors, friends, colleagues. A tableau of comforting normalcy, behind which an unimaginable drama was unfolding. I got out of the car, adjusting my tie. My expression, I hoped, was still one of weary grief. But underneath, a switch had been flipped. The quiet contractor was gone. The man who had once navigated far more dangerous landscapes, who had understood the subtle currents of deception and the intricate dance of hidden agendas, was stirring. He was awake, and he was furious. The first thing I needed was access. Access to Eleanor's things. Her study, her computer, her old journals. Things I'd instinctively avoided in my grief, respecting her privacy. Now, privacy was a luxury neither of us could afford. Every detail, every scrap of paper, every digital footprint could be a clue. And I had to find them before anyone else did. Before they did. And before my own children inadvertently or deliberately destroyed them. Dad, are you coming in? David's voice from the porch. He was holding the door open, his posture still rigid. I met his gaze. It was a strange moment, suspended in time. A son looking at his father. A father looking at a potential adversary. Yes, son, I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the seismic shifts within me. Just needed a moment to breathe. I walked towards the house, towards the dozens of watchful eyes, towards the labyrinth of lies that was now my life. The game had just begun, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that this was a game I couldn't afford to lose. For Eleanor, for myself, and maybe, just maybe for my children too, even if I couldn't trust them. The house buzzed with the low murmur of sympathetic voices, the clinking of glasses, and the clatter of plates. Awake, a ghoulish irony. I navigated the crowd, accepting hugs and condolences, my mind a steel trap, every nerve alert. It was a bizarre, almost out-of-body experience. I was Art Finch, the grieving widower, playing my part to perfection. But inside, another man was at work, sifting through the noise, analyzing, planning. Art, dear, how are you holding up? Mrs. Peterson, our next-door neighbor, a woman whose entire existence seemed to revolve around church bake sales and neighborhood gossip, pressed a lukewarm casserole into my hands. Thank you, Carol. Trying to, I managed a wan smile. Her eyes, usually so sharp, seemed genuinely soft with pity. Good. Pity was a cloak. It made people drop their guard. David and Sarah moved through the crowd with practiced ease. David, ever the networker, was already deep in conversation with a couple from Eleanor's school board, his voice hushed, serious. Sarah, meanwhile, was graciously accepting comfort from Eleanor's oldest friend, Susan Davies, a woman who had known Eleanor since college. Sarah's tears seemed fresh again, her sniffles audible. If it was an act, it was a damn good one. But then, good actors were everywhere, and I knew a thing or two about performance. My priority was clear: Eleanor's study. It was her sanctuary, a small room at the back of the house, filled with books, dusty academic journals, and a cluttered desk. I hadn't touched it since she'd supposedly died. Now it was a treasure trove, a potential minefield. "Excuse me for a moment." I mumbled to no one in particular, setting the casserole down. "Need to freshen up." I slipped away, making my way through the throngs of well-meaning mourners, up the old oak staircase. Every step creaked under my weight, familiar sounds that now felt like amplified warnings. I paused at the top, listening. The sound from downstairs were distant, muffled. No one was following. Not yet, anyway. Eleanor's study door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open gently. The room was dark, the blinds drawn. A faint scent of old paper, lavender, and something else, something metallic almost. Or was that just my imagination, priming itself for discovery? I switched on a small desk lamp. Its weak glow illuminated the chaos of her life. Stacks of books on everything from Roman history to quantum physics, the kind of eclectic collection only a librarian could amass. Photos of us, of the kids, smiling, framed on the shelves. A small, chipped mug with a faded cartoon cat. Also normal. So Eleanor. But the message: I am alive. I am not in the coffin. I started with her desk. It was overflowing. Papers, pens, post-it notes. A half-finished crossword puzzle. My eyes scanned everything, not looking for specifics yet, but for anything out of place. Anything that screamed, not a librarian. I checked the drawers first. Standard office supplies, her spectacles, a small bag of peppermint candies. Nothing. Then, under a stack of old utility bills in the bottom drawer, my fingers brushed against something hard cold. A small, sleek USB drive. Black. No labels. The kind that held more than just family photos. The kind that whispered secrets. This was it. The first thread. I pocketed it instinctively. My heart quickened, but my hands remained steady. This was familiar territory. The thrill of the hunt, the cold logic of the game. It felt right. Terrifying, but right. Next, her computer. An old, clunky desktop model. She rarely used it for anything more than emailing colleagues or managing her online book club. I turned it on. It whirred to life, a familiar, comforting sound. I knew her password, our anniversary date. She wasn't one for complex encryptions. Or so I thought. The desktop was a mess of icons. Folders for book club, garden club, recipes. Innocent. But I opened her My Documents folder. It was surprisingly organized. Too organized, maybe. My eyes scanned the file names. Summer Reading List 2023, Volunteers Schedule, Eleanor's Garden Plans. All mundane. Then I saw it. A folder simply named Project Nightingale. No preview. No date modified, immediately visible. My pulse hammered. Nightingale. A bird that sings in the dark. A code name? I tried to open it. Password protected. Of course. This was a different beast. Eleanor would never password protect a folder unless it was truly sensitive. This wasn't her anniversary date. It wasn't the kids' birthdays. This was something else entirely. I leaned back in her chair, the old springs groaning. My mind began to race, pulling at threads of memory. Eleanor's habits, her interests, her little quirks. She was a history buff, a lover of puzzles, especially cryptograms. She often complained about the lazy security protocols people used. She liked to make things poetic. Nightingale. A bird. What did nightingales do? They sang. What else? They were often associated with secrecy, with hidden beauty, with things that emerged in the darkness. What was a common code for nightingale? or something associated with it. A song? A scientific name? Leucinia megarincos. Too long. A literary reference? Keats? Byron? Then it hit me. A memory, fleeting but vivid. Years ago, we were watching an old movie, a spy thriller. There was a character, a female agent, whose code name was Nightingale. And her cover, her fake identity, was a librarian. Her password, revealed in a tense scene, was the title of her favorite book. A classic, one she'd read dozens of times. Eleanor's favorite book. It was always the same one. She'd read it to the kids, quoted from it, practically memorized it. To Kill a Mockingbird. I type it in carefully. To Kill a Mockingbird. No spaces capitalized. The folder opened. My breath hitched. It wasn't filled with documents. It was filled with encrypted files. Hundreds of them, each named with a string of seemingly random letters and numbers. But within the folder, there was one file that wasn't encrypted. It was a simple text document. Read me first. I clicked it. The screen filled with text. It wasn't a message from Eleanor. It was a diary, a log, a meticulously kept record of observations, contacts, and suspicions. It read like a private investigator's journal, except the subject wasn't some cheating husband or stolen inheritance. It was about something far larger, far more dangerous. The first entry was dated almost 2 years ago. Initially, I dismissed it as office gossip. Whispers about unusual land acquisitions in the surrounding counties. Small parcels, often bought through shell companies, then quickly resold to larger entities at significant profit margins. Nothing illegal on the surface, just aggressive business practices. But then Mrs. Davison, one of my regular patrons, mentioned her cousin's farm in Hadley. He was pushed out, she said, forced to sell for a fraction of what it was worth. And the buyer? A subsidiary of the Thornton Group. Thornton Group. The name resonated with a cold familiarity. Henry Thornton, a name that had flashed across the news for various philanthropic endeavors, for his tech company's rapid ascent, for his political donations. A pillar of the community, at least on the surface. I read on, my eyes devouring the words. Eleanor, my quiet, gentle Eleanor, had been investigating Henry Thornton. And it wasn't just about land. It was about something deeper, darker. Her notes spoke of environmental violations, shell corporations, political lobbying that bordered on blackmail, and hints of something far more sinister involving defense contracts and data manipulation. She was methodical, thorough, piecing together a mosaic of corruption. She even had contacts, anonymous sources she referred to by code names, Blue Jay Owl. This wasn't a librarian's curiosity. This was the work of a professional, someone with training, with a mission. And suddenly, a lifetime of small, dismissed details about Eleanor's past, her family history, her sudden interest in cybersecurity or corporate law, clicked into place. She wasn't just a librarian. She was a spy, or had been, and she'd reactivated. A sudden creak from the hallway outside. My head snapped up. I froze, holding my breath. The house was still abuzz with muffled voices from downstairs. Was it just the old house settling? Or had someone come up? I quickly minimized the document, closing the Project Nightingale folder. I opened a generic browser window, making it look like I'd just been checking emails. My hand was already on the USB drive in my pocket, ready to pull it out if needed. The door to the study creaked again, more definitively this time. Then, a shadow fell across the threshold. Dad? Everything okay? You've been up here a while. It was Sarah. Her voice was soft, but her eyes, wide and searching, scanned the room. Straight to the desk, to the glowing computer screen. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm. Play cool, Art. Play cool. Yeah, honey. Just looking for something of your mom's. Old photos, maybe. Trying to find some comfort. I gestured vaguely at the stacks of books. Sarah stepped into the room, her gaze lingering on the computer screen. Looking for photos on the desktop? She asked, a faint eyebrow raised. Her tone was innocent, but the question was a razor's edge. She knew I wasn't exactly tech-savvy. My mind raced. This was the first test, and I couldn't afford to fail. No, just got sidetracked. Opened the browser, remembering how she always used to keep a million tabs open for research. Just got lost in thought. I waved my hand vaguely. Hard to believe she's gone, isn't it? My voice, I hoped, was appropriately mournful. Sarah's expression softened, the sharpness in her eyes fading. She came over and put a hand on my shoulder. I know, Dad. It's hard for all of us. She squeezed my shoulder. Come on downstairs. David's getting antsy. He wants to talk to you about, well, about Mom's estate. Practicalities, you know. Practicalities. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. David, the investment banker, already circling the assets. Or was it just genuine concern? My inner alarm screamed a warning. Don't trust the kids. Right. The estate. I sighed, a performance of a man weary with grief and mundane tasks. Give me a minute, honey. I'll be right down. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. Okay, Dad. Don't be too long. She gave my shoulder another squeeze, then turned and left the room, the door creaking shut behind her. I waited until I heard her footsteps disappear down the stairs, swallowed by the noise of the wake. Then, with a speed that belied my age, I pulled the USB drive from my pocket. It was time to get serious. Eleanor wasn't just a target. She was an agent. And if she was alive, she was still fighting. And now so was I. And the first order of business was to understand the enemy. And my own family. The true game had just begun. And it was far more complex, far more dangerous than anything I could have ever imagined. I didn't waste another second. I carefully removed the USB drive from my pocket. It wasn't just a storage device. It was a Pandora's box, or a lifeline. I had to assume everything Eleanor had on it was vital, and likely encrypted beyond anything I could crack with my old skills. But I knew someone who could. Leon McCabe, my former colleague from the old days, as we euphemistically called our time together in the less-than-official government branches. Lenny was a ghost, a whisper in the wind, a master of digital espionage and data reconstruction. He was also the only person on Earth who knew the full extent of my past, and vice versa. He'd retired to a quiet life, running a discreet cybersecurity firm out of a repurposed industrial loft in Providence, Rhode Island. Digital forensics and ethical hacking, his website proclaimed. A polite fiction for what he really did for the right price. I shut down Eleanor's computer, pulling the plug for good measure. No sense leaving any digital fingerprints. I tucked the USB drive securely into a hidden pocket sewn into the lining of my coat years ago, a habit from a life I thought was long gone. Then I headed downstairs, putting on my grieving widower mask once more. The reception was still in full swing. David was now talking animatedly with a group of Eleanor's former colleagues, his hands gesturing, his voice lower, conspiratorial. My antennae twitched. Sarah was still with Susan Davies, but her eyes kept straying towards David, a flicker of something unreadable in her gaze. Unease? Concern? Or something else? I grabbed a paper plate and helped myself to some stale sandwiches, making small talk with old Mr. Henderson about the erratic New England weather. My mind, however, was miles away, already plotting. I needed to get away from the house, to get to Lenny, and I needed to do it without raising suspicion. David finally made his way over to me, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. Scotch, probably. He rarely drank during the day, especially not at a family event. Another subtle inconsistency. Dad, can we talk for a minute? In the living room. His tone was crisp, businesslike. Of course, son. My voice was calm, steady. The predator had located its prey. We moved into the living room, a space that felt strangely formal, less lived in than the rest of the house. The heavy velvet curtains were drawn, casting the room in a dim, sepia-toned light. David turned to face me, his hands thrust into his pockets. He didn't meet my gaze directly. Look, Dad, he began, his voice lowered. I know this is tough. Mom, it's a huge loss. But we need to think about the practicalities. The estate, her will. You know, Ido, David. And we will. In due time. I kept my voice gentle, even. He shook his head, a nervous tremor in his movements. No, Dad, I think we need to do it now. Or, at least, sooner rather than later. There are some complexities. Financial ones. My internal alarm bell screamed. Financial complexities. That was usually code for trouble. And coming from an investment banker who was already too close to the Thornton Group's machinations, it tasted like poison. What kind of complexities, David? I asked, my voice still mild, but with an underlying steel that I hoped he wouldn't recognize. He finally met my gaze, and for a fleeting second, I saw it. Fear. Raw, unadulterated fear. It was quickly masked by a practiced bravado, but it was there. Mom. Mom had a secret account, he said, his voice barely a whisper. A substantial one, and it's not exactly clean. There are transfers, large sums, to accounts in less than reputable jurisdictions, and a few to shell companies with ties to Thornton Group affiliates. My heart skipped a beat. Eleanor's investigation wasn't just theoretical. She was actively moving money or tracking it, and David had found it, or, more likely, had been shown it. How do you know about this, David? My voice remained calm, but the ice had started to form. He hesitated, shifting his weight. I was helping Mom with her taxes. She asked me to look over some old statements, and I found it. She swore me to secrecy, Dad. Said it was for something important. She was investigating. But these transactions, they look like money laundering. Or worse. He was sweating, despite the cool temperature in the room. A sudden, sharp thought pierced through the fog. Don't trust the kids. Was he trying to frame Eleanor? Or was he genuinely scared? The fear I saw in his eyes was real enough. But fear can make people do desperate things. So you're saying your mother, a school librarian, was involved in money laundering? I leaned in slightly, my eyes boring into his. And you kept this from me? He flinched. She made me promise, Dad. She said it was dangerous. And she said she didn't want you involved. To protect you. A plausible lie. Or a plausible truth. Either way, it made me question everything. Had Eleanor lied to both of us, separately? Or was David lying now? And these shell companies, David? You said they had ties to Thornton Group. How do you know that? He swallowed hard. I've done some work with the Thornton Group, Dad. Minor consulting, nothing big. But I recognize some of the names. And some of the methods. He looked away, his jaw tight. I think Mom was onto something big, Dad. And I think it got her killed. Killed. Not just died. He'd said kill. A Freudian slip? Or a desperate plea for help. So you think her death wasn't natural? I pressed, careful to keep my voice even, merely seeking clarification. I don't know, Dad. But after seeing those accounts, those transactions, I'm terrified. For her. And for us. His voice cracked slightly. I think someone wanted her silenced. He thought she was silenced. He didn't say he knew she was. This was important. He believed she was dead, which meant he wasn't directly involved in the fake funeral. But his proximity to Thornton, his knowledge of Eleanor's hidden account, it made him a liability. Or a pawn. All right, David. Thank you for telling me. It changes things. I paused, letting the weight of my words hang in the air. I need some time to process this. To think. He nodded, visibly relieved that I wasn't lashing out. Of course, Dad. Take your time. But be careful. These people, they're ruthless. I know, son. Believe me, I know. I gave him a curt nod. I think I'll take a drive. Clear my head. Get away from all this. I gestured vaguely at the house. You and Sarah can manage things here, yes? David looked surprised, but quickly recovered. Yes, Dad. Of course. We'll take care of everything. He looked almost eager. Too eager. I knew this was my window. My escape route. I needed to act fast. Good. I headed for the door, my step firm. I'll be back tonight. Don't worry if I'm late. As I walked out of the house, leaving David in the dim living room, I felt a knot of dread mixed with a surge of grim determination. He was caught, no doubt. Caught in Thornton's web, entangled by his own ambition and fear. Whether he was a willing accomplice or a reluctant victim, I couldn't yet say. But he was compromised, and that meant the message was right. Don't trust the kids. I got in my old Ford F-150 pickup truck, the same one I'd driven for 2 decades, its engine roaring to life with a familiar grumble. It wasn't fancy, but it was dependable. Like me once. I pulled out of the driveway, past the lingering mourners' cars, and turned onto the main road. I didn't look back. The rain had let up, but the sky was still a bruised purple. The setting sun cast long, skeletal shadows of trees across the road. I had a destination, Providence, and a mission, to unlock the secrets Eleanor had taken to her grave, or rather, the empty grave, and to find her, and to deal with anyone who stood in my way. My hands, rough and strong, gripped the steering wheel. The quiet contractor was gone. Art Finch, the man who built things, was now ready to dismantle. And I knew, with a bone-deep certainty, that whoever had tangled with my Eleanor, whoever had dared to mess with my family, was about to learn a very, very expensive lesson. Because sometimes the quiet ones are the most dangerous, especially when they have nothing left to lose. The drive to Providence felt both impossibly long and alarmingly short. Each mile clicked by, taking me further from the suburban facade of my life and deeper into the unsettling reality Eleanor's message had ripped open. The landscape morphed from quaint New England towns to the grittier, more industrial edges of Rhode Island's capital. The old F-150, its suspension protesting on the potholes, was my trusty steel shell. Lenny's office was in an old mill building, repurposed into tech startups and art studios. His particular space was on the third floor, behind an unassuming door with a minimalist plaque. L. McCabe and Associates, Digital Security. No flashy neon, no grand entrance. Just like Lenny himself, and just like me back in the day, I found a parking spot a block away, tucked between a dumpster and a dilapidated brick wall, the kind of place that would go unnoticed by anyone not specifically looking. Habit. Old habits die hard, and some, it seemed, never died at all. I killed the engine, sitting for a moment, letting the hum of the city replace the roar of my internal monologue. I pulled the USB drive from its hidden pocket. It felt heavier now, charged with the weight of untold truths. The hallway was dimly lit, smelling faintly of old concrete and stale coffee. I found Lenny's door, knocked twice, a specific rhythm we used to use, a forgotten code from another life. A pause. Then, the door opened a crack. Lenny peered out, his face a roadmap of wrinkles, a pair of thick glasses perched on his nose. He had always been slight, almost frail, but his eyes were still sharp like tiny lasers, missing nothing. He was wearing a faded band t-shirt and cargo shorts, a stark contrast to my funeral attire. His silver hair, once meticulously combed, was now a wild, untamed bush. "Art?" he rasped, his voice a gravelly whisper. "Jesus, Archie, what are you doing here? You look like you've been to a funeral." A flicker of genuine surprise, then recognition, crossed his face. "Wait, Eleanor. I heard. My condolences, old friend." I gave him a tired nod. "Thanks, Lenny. But I need more than condolences. I need your help. And your discretion." He studied my face, his sharp eyes picking up the subtle shifts in my posture, the tension around my jaw, the unervingly calm resolve in my gaze. He'd seen that look before. Usually, it meant someone was about to disappear, or something very bad was about to happen. Come in," he said, opening the door wider. He led me into his office. It was a chaotic symphony of blinking lights, humming servers, and multiple monitors displaying a dizzying array of code, maps, and cryptic data. The scent of ozone and strong coffee filled the air. This was his element. "Sit," he offered, gesturing to a battered leather armchair that looked like it had survived several wars. He sat at his main console, his fingers already dancing over the keyboard, calling up diagnostics and network statuses. "So, Eleanor died suddenly," the report said. "Heart attack." He didn't look at me, but his voice was devoid of real sympathy. He was already processing. "She didn't," I said, my voice flat. I pulled out the USB drive and placed it on his desk. "She's alive. Or at least, she was a few hours ago. And she told me not to trust the kids." Lenny stopped typing. He slowly turned, picked up the USB drive, weighed it in his hand. His gaze, unblinking, met mine. For a moment, we were no longer two old men. We were two operatives back in the game. "That's quite the funeral story, Art. You're sure?" I received a message from an unknown number immediately after the burial. "I'm alive. I'm not in the coffin." "Then don't trust the kids." I deleted the messages, but I saw them. I heard them. Lenny nodded slowly, his mind already spinning through possibilities. An elaborate charade. And a dangerous one. Who else knows? No one. Or everyone. That's what I need to find out. I found this in her study hidden. It's password protected, but I managed to open the folder. It's full of encrypted files. Project Nightingale. Lenny's eyebrows shot up. Nightingale? That's an old one. Codename for a Black Ops unit back in the 80s. Specialized in deep cover intelligence gathering. High risk, high return. They were supposedly all decommissioned, wiped from the books. He looked at me, a new kind of intensity in his eyes. Eleanor, was she one of them? I didn't answer directly. Her favorite book was To Kill a Mockingbird. Her password for the folder was the title. She was investigating a man named Henry Thornton. His company, the Thornton Group. Land acquisitions, corporate corruption, hints of something much bigger. And David, my son, just told me Eleanor had a secret account, substantial funds, ties to shell companies connected to Thornton. He thinks she was money laundering. He thinks she was killed. Lenny absorbed all this, his expression unreadable. He plugged the USB drive into a dedicated air-gapped terminal. His fingers flew across the keyboard, a blur of practiced motion. Lines of code scrolled across the screen, a digital waterfall of ones and zeros. This will take time, Art. This isn't some simple encryption. If she was a Nightingale, their protocols were legendary, designed to withstand nation-state attacks. He didn't look up from the screen. But if anyone can get into it, it's me. Give me a few hours, maybe more. I'll prioritize it. And in the meantime, he finally looked at me, his gaze piercing. You need to disappear? Properly. Your house is compromised. Your kids are compromised. Your face is compromised. Assume they already know you've seen something. You're a loose end. I'm already off the grid, Lenny. Left the truck a block away. Took the back stairwell. No phone, no credit cards. Cash only. I patted my coat. But I need to know what's on this drive. And I need to know about Thornton. Everything. His connections, his operations, his weaknesses. Lenny nodded, a grim smile playing on his lips. Consider it done. I'll tap into a few old databases, see what dirt I can dig up on Mr. Thornton. And I'll send out a feeler for any chatter about a resurrected Nightingale. It's a long shot, but sometimes old ghosts like to walk. And the kids, I pressed. David, he's caught in something. Fear in his eyes. Sarah, she's too quiet. I need to know if they're tools or victims. That's harder, Art. Familial dynamics are a bitch. Hard to read from a distance. But I can run background checks, financial forensics on David. See where his money trails lead. Sarah, she's tougher. Her digital footprint is minimal. But I can look. Thank you, Lenny. I stood up. I'll be in the bolt hole. My old one. Off Route 14. You know the coordinates. Lenny nodded again, his eyes already back on the screen, lost in the digital matrix. Be careful, Art. You're playing with fire. Bigger fire than even we used to deal with. These aren't just corporate thugs. If Eleanor was a Nightingale and she got caught up in this, it means whatever she found is something powerful people want buried. Permanently. I didn't need his warning. I felt in my bones. But the image of Eleanor alive, somewhere out there, fighting, fueled a cold, relentless fire in my own gut. I know, Lenny, and they're about to find out what happens when you poke a sleeping bear. I slipped out of his office as quietly as I'd entered, a shadow melting into the industrial labyrinth. The world outside felt sharper, colors more vivid, sounds more distinct. I was no longer a grieving widower. I was Art Finch, agent, strategist, hunter, and my prey was Henry Thornton, and anyone else who had dared to touch my Eleanor. And as for my children, the truth, no matter how ugly, would set us free, or burn us all to ashes. I had no which, and I had to know soon, because the clock was ticking and the game had turned deadly. The bolt hole wasn't much, just a forgotten hunting cabin nestled deep within the vast, sprawling woodlands of northwestern Connecticut. It was a place I'd bought decades ago, ostensibly for hunting season, but in truth, it was my failsafe. Stocked with dried goods, water purification tablets, a shortwave radio, and a cache of tools that went far beyond what a weekend hunter might need. No cell service, no internet, just the whispering pines and the distant call of a hawk. Perfect for someone who needed to vanish. I spent the next few hours activating its dormant systems, checking the perimeter. The old cabin, left undisturbed for years, welcomed me back with the scent of pine and damp earth. I rigged up a makeshift antenna for the shortwave, fine-tuning it to the frequency Lenny and I had set up long ago for emergencies. It was a slow, agonizing process, this waiting. My mind, usually a whirl of activity, was forced into a tense, uneasy calm. I reviewed everything I knew. Eleanor, a school librarian, secretly a former or active Nightingale operative. Deep cover, specialized in intelligence. She was investigating Henry Thornton, a powerful, ruthless tech and defense magnate. David, my son, caught in Thornton's financial web, convinced Eleanor was dead, implicated in money laundering. Sarah, quiet, watchful, her role still unclear. And me, the simple contractor, now reactivated, plunged back into a world of shadows I thought I'd escaped. The irony was not lost on me. I had built a life of normalcy for Eleanor, for our children, precisely to escape this kind of existence, to give them a peaceful, uncomplicated world. And now, that world was revealed to be a fragile illusion, shattered by the very forces I tried to shield them from. Eleanor, it seemed, had always lived in both worlds, effortlessly bridging the gap between baking cookies and covert operations. How much of her life with me had been real, and how much a carefully constructed facade? The question gnawed at me, a cold, bitter taste in my mouth. Late that night, the shortwave radio crackled to life. Static, then Lenny's distinctive, gravelly voice, distorted but clear enough to understand. "Art, you there, old man?" "I'm here, Lenny." Status report. My voice was devoid of emotion, all business. "All right, buckle up. This gets ugly. First, the good news. I cracked the drive. Not easy. Your Eleanor was a damn genius. She used a custom encryption algorithm, hybridized. Took me 12 hours, a lot of coffee, and a few choice words I haven't used since Beirut. But I got in. A wave of grim satisfaction washed over me. Eleanor, always full of surprises. And what did you find? A treasure trove, Art, and a nightmare. Your wife wasn't just investigating Thornton. She was preparing to expose him. She had compiled a dossier so damning, it would make the Panama Papers look like a grocery list. This isn't just about land deals. This is massive, systemic corruption deeply entwined with national security interests. Lenny paused, and I could hear him taking a deep breath, the static-laced sound amplified by the radio. Thornton Group, it turns out, isn't just a tech and defense contractor. It's a front for a shadow network. They've been siphoning off billions from classified defense projects, diverting funds, manipulating data, even tampering with intelligence reports to benefit their own agenda. And they're not just selling data or technology. They're building a private army, mercenaries, operating under the guise of private security solutions. They're destabilizing regions, influencing elections, all for profit and power. They're effectively a rogue state operating within our own borders. My blood ran cold. This was far beyond what I had imagined. A school librarian going up against a private military-industrial complex. It was insane and incredibly brave. And Eleanor was going to expose them? Yes. And she had the proof. Financial records, encrypted communications, even drone footage and satellite imagery of some of their black sites. She had moles, Art, deep inside Thornton's operation. She wasn't just observing. She was actively dismantling them from the inside out. So her death was a planned extraction, a necessary play. She knew they were closing in. The last few files on the drive are communication logs. She activated an old Nightingale protocol. She sent out a distress signal, initiated a ghost protocol for her own disappearance. Someone helped her. Someone from her past. Someone who knew how to make a body disappear and replace it with, well, we don't know who's in that coffin, Art. But it isn't Eleanor. The relief, the raw, unfiltered surge of hope was so overwhelming it almost buckled my knees. She was alive. My Eleanor. She was alive and still fighting. But it was quickly replaced by a chilling realization. This wasn't just about finding her. This was about joining her fight. And the kids, Lenny? Specifically David. His involvement with Thornton. David. That's a complicated one. He's not a willing accomplice. Not exactly. More like ensnared. He got caught up in some bad investments, leveraged himself to the hilt. Thornton Group offered him a bailout, disguised as an exclusive consulting contract. But it was a trap. They used his financial desperation to gain access to his firm's proprietary algorithms, their market analysis. And then they started leaning on him. They forced him to monitor Eleanor, to report on her activities, anything unusual. He's been feeding them information, Art. Under duress, probably. But he's a mole. Might get twisted. David, my son, caught in the very web Eleanor was trying to destroy, and he thought she was dead, and he was now covering his tracks, likely for fear of Thornton. And Sarah? Sarah, she's clean, Art. As far as I can tell. She's been genuinely grieving. She might have noticed things, been suspicious of David's behavior, but she's not directly involved. She's more like an unwitting bystander, caught in the fallout. A small, weary sigh escaped me. At least one of my children was untouched by this poison. For now. So, Eleanor is alive, likely hiding, still trying to expose Thornton. She has the proof. What's her plan? That's the thing, Art. The drive has a final message from her. Encrypted, of course. For your eyes only, she said. It's a dead man's switch. Or rather, a live woman's switch. She left instructions. If something happened to her, if she couldn't make contact within a certain time frame, the data would go public. But if you activate it, if you engage, you become her proxy. Her final gambit. My knuckles whitened as I gripped the radio. What does it say? It's an audio file, Art. Encrypted for your voice print. I can't open it. Only you can. But it's clear. She wants you to finish what she started. To take down Thornton. She left you all the tools. All the information. She's trusting you with her life, and with the lives of countless others. I closed my eyes, picturing Eleanor's face, her calm, determined smile. My gentle librarian. My secret agent. My wife. She knew me. Knew my past. Knew I wouldn't back down. Not from this. Not from her. All right, Lenny. Send me the audio file. And prepare for what comes next. Thornton just made his biggest mistake. He messed with the wrong family. I'll send it, Art. Be careful. This is a hornet's nest, and you're walking in with a flamethrower. Lenny's voice was grim, but there was a hint of pride there, too. He knew what I was capable of. The shortwave went silent. I sat in the dark cabin, the scent of old wood and pine filling my lungs. My mind was buzzing, a storm of strategy and cold, calculated fury. Eleanor's ghost, or rather, her very real presence, was guiding me. She had given me the map, the tools, the mission. Now it was my turn to execute. First, the audio file, her voice, her instructions. Then, a plan to extract David from Thornton's grip and to use him as a weapon against his tormentor. And finally, to bring down the entire corrupt empire of Henry Thornton, piece by meticulous piece. They had buried an empty coffin, but they had awakened a sleeping giant, and they were about to learn that some graves, once disturbed, unleash a force far more potent than they could ever imagine. A force called Art Finch, and he was coming for them, with all the ruthlessness and precision he had painstakingly buried for decades. This wasn't just about justice. It was about love and the sacred promise I had made to a woman who was anything but ordinary. The encrypted audio file arrived via a burst transmission, a familiar, almost forgotten ping on my shortwave receiver. I downloaded it to a rugged, self-wiping tablet Lenny had provided, one specifically designed for off-grid operations. My hands, still steady despite the hurricane brewing inside me, placed the earbuds in my ears. The cabin was silent, save for the distant chirping of crickets and the rustle of leaves outside. Then her voice. It wasn't the Eleanor I had mourned, the soft, lilting voice I knew from our quiet evenings. This was a different Eleanor. Her voice was calm, utterly composed, yet laced with an undeniable steel, a quiet authority I had only glimpsed in flashes over our 35 years together. It was the voice of commander and operative. Art, she began, her tone a blend of tenderness and unwavering resolve. If you're hearing this, it means I've gone dark. Or worse. But I need you to know, I'm alive. I had to go. To protect you, to protect the kids, and to finish what I started. This was the only way. My throat tightened, a lump forming in my chest. Hearing her voice, confirming her survival, was a potent elixir, washing away the bitter taste of grief. But the mission, the danger, was clearer than ever. "I know this is a lot, my love," she continued, "and I'm sorry to drag you back into this life. But you're the only one I trust, the only one capable. You know these games, you know how to play them, and you know what's at stake." She paused, and I imagined her, wherever she was, her brow furrowed in concentration, her eyes gleaming with intelligence. "Thornton," she pronounced the name with a cold fury, "is far more dangerous than anyone realizes. His group isn't just a corporation. It's a deep-state shadow organization, a consortium of corrupt officials, industrialists, and black market operatives. They've infiltrated every level of government, from defense to finance. They're manufacturing crises, manipulating markets, and funding covert operations that serve only their own insatiable greed and lust for power. They're a cancer. I was close, Art. Too close. I had a network, moles inside, but one of them was compromised. Or worse, a double agent. I had to initiate the ghost protocol. The body in the coffin. It's a John Doe, a victim of a forgotten traffic accident, doctored to resemble me just enough for a quick identification. It was a hell of a stunt, coordinated by an old friend from my former life. He believed in my cause. A John Doe. The image was sickening, yet strangely comforting. At least it wasn't a stranger's tragedy being exploited for a farce. It was a nameless person, already gone, serving a greater purpose. "The data on the drive," Eleanor continued, "is everything. Financial ledgers, encrypted communication logs, intelligence reports, schematics for their black sites, identities of their key operatives. It's the smoking gun, but it's useless if it just sits there. It needs to be disseminated, publicly, irrefutably, and in a way that creates maximum chaos for Thornton and his network, making it impossible for them to recover." Her voice hardened. "My plan was to leak it through a series of anonymous drops, simultaneously, to multiple independent journalists and international oversight committees. But I've been cut off. My network is compromised. I can't risk exposing anyone else. So it's up to you, Art." She then laid out the framework of her plan. It was intricate, multi-layered, a masterclass in psychological warfare and strategic disruption. It wasn't about a single grand gesture, but a series of calculated blows, each designed to chip away at Thornton's empire, to sow distrust among his allies, and to force his hand into making a fatal error. "First," she instructed, "you need to secure David. He's been compromised. Thornton's people are using his financial vulnerabilities to pressure him. He knows too much about my activities, about the accounts. He's a loose and they'll want to tie up or leverage. Get him out. Make him safe. He's not a villain, Art. He's just lost." Her tenderness for David, despite his unwitting betrayal, was palpable. It was a mother's love, unwavering. "Then, you need to use the data on the drive. Not all at once. Selectively. Each leak must be carefully timed, carefully targeted, to discredit a specific aspect of Thornton's operations. Start with his philanthropic land deals, expose his environmental violations. Then move on to his defense contracts, the siphoning of funds. Make sure the information reaches the right hands. The journalists I've identified in the contacts file, the specific Senate Oversight Committee members who aren't on his payroll. And use your old contacts, Art, your network. They'll remember you. They'll help." She continued, detailing specific files, their code names, their potential impact. It was a blueprint for war. And finally, the red button file. It's a failsafe, a complete data dump designed to go viral, to hit every major news outlet, every government agency, every dark corner of the internet, all at once. Only use it as a last resort. If they corner you, if they corner me, if all else fails, it will burn their empire to the ground, but it will also expose a lot of secrets, some of which are best left buried. It's a nuclear option, Art. Use it wisely. Her voice softened again, a hint of the Eleanor I knew, the woman who had shared my bed, my life. "I know this is asking too much. To ask you to abandon your quiet life, to embrace the ghost you buried. But I wouldn't ask unless it was absolutely vital. I believe in you, Art. I always have. And I need you now more than ever. I love you, she whispered, her voice cracking slightly, and I'll find you. When this is over, be careful. And remember, the quiet ones often see the most. And strike the hardest. Goodbye, my love. For now, the recording ended. The cabin was silent once more, but now it felt different. Not just empty, but filled with Eleanor's presence, her mission, her trust. I pulled out the earbuds, my hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the surge of purpose that now coursed through my veins. The puzzle pieces had clicked into place. My mission was clear. Step 1, secure David. This was the most delicate part. He was compromised, scared, and potentially a liability. I couldn't just snatch him. I had to approach him carefully, dismantle the lies he believed, and show him the truth without pushing him further into Thornton's clutches. I spent the rest of the night poring over Eleanor's files, particularly the ones related to David's financial entanglements with Thornton. She had detailed everything. The specific shell companies, the terms of the consulting contracts, the veiled threats. She had even predicted how Thornton would leverage David's ambition and fear. My wife was not just an operative. She was a master psychologist. By dawn, I had a plan. A risky one, but necessary. I couldn't communicate with David directly. Any contact would be monitored. I needed a go-between, someone innocent enough to avoid suspicion, yet close enough to David to deliver the message. Sarah, my daughter. She was clean, uncompromised. She was also perceptive and fiercely loyal to her family. If I could reach her, if I could give her just enough information to plant a seed of doubt about David's situation, without revealing the full, terrifying truth about Eleanor, it might work. It was a gamble, but Eleanor had taught me to play the long game. I started rigging up a disposable burner phone, meticulously wiping its metadata. I would send a single, cryptic text message to Sarah, something that would pique her curiosity, make her question David, and give her a reason to look into his affairs, without drawing unwanted attention to herself or to me. The sun rose, painting the forest in hues of gold and amber. My quiet life was definitively over. The contractor's tools were replaced by an operative's arsenal of information and strategy. Henry Thornton and his shadowy empire had made a grave mistake. They had underestimated a school librarian and her quiet, unassuming husband, and they were about to face the consequences. Because Art Finch, the man who knew how to build, was now ready to tear down. And he was coming with the full force of a love that refused to be buried. My first move had to be surgical, precise, and utterly deniable. The goal: plant a seed of doubt in Sarah's mind about David, nudging her to investigate his financial dealings without revealing the true depth of the rabbit hole. I didn't want her caught in the crossfire, but she was my only clean link. I used the burner phone, carefully wiped and routed through a series of anonymous proxies, to send a single text message to Sarah. The content was simple, almost benign, yet laced with a subtle venom I knew she, with her sharp mind, would eventually dissect. Sarah, look closely at David's recent financial statements. Specifically, any transactions involving Horizon Holdings LLC. A mother's intuition can be sharp, even when she's gone. A friend. Short, vague, and just enough to make her look. Horizon Holdings LLC was one of Thornton's shell companies that Eleanor had meticulously documented as being involved in David's consulting contracts. If Sarah saw that name, she might connect it to David's current unease, to his sudden interest in Eleanor's estate, to the strange energy she'd likely picked up from him. Then I put the phone in a plastic bag and, following an old protocol, buried it deep under a fallen log near the cabin, knowing it would eventually be found by an animal or decay into oblivion, leaving no trace. The waiting began again. This was the hardest part of any operation, the lag between action and reaction. My internal clock, however, was no longer calibrated to the slow rhythm of the Connecticut suburbs. It was ticking at the frantic pace of a ticking bomb. While I waited for Sarah's reaction, I turned my attention to the broader strategy against Thornton. Eleanor's files were a gold mine, a meticulously constructed blueprint for his downfall. I started with the public-facing aspects of his empire, his philanthropic ventures, his environmental initiatives. These were his vulnerabilities, his perceived strengths that, once exposed, would become his greatest weaknesses. Eleanor had a file, coded greenwash, detailing how Thornton Group used its eco-friendly land acquisitions to mask illegal waste disposal sites and lucrative, environmentally destructive rare earth mining operations. The evidence was damning. Before and after satellite images, leaked internal memos, testimonies from whistleblowers. My target, a prominent environmental journalist Eleanor had marked as trustworthy, a woman named Carla Rossi from the Boston Globe. She had a reputation for dogged investigation and an unwavering commitment to truth. But I couldn't just email her the files. That would be too direct, too traceable. I needed to use an anonymous dead drop, one that appeared to come from someone inside Thornton's organization, someone desperate to expose the truth, not a grieving widower from Connecticut. I spent the better part of the day crafting a package. It included a carefully selected subset of Eleanor's greenwash files, printed out and anonymized, along with a cryptic, handwritten note that sounded like a desperate plea from an insider. The note would contain just enough insider jargon to be convincing, hinting at a vast conspiracy without revealing the full extent of it. I then planned my route. It involved a trip to a public library in a different state, a disposable flash drive, and a series of public Wi-Fi networks to mask my digital footprint. I'd mail the physical package from a random post office in a bustling city, using a false return address. As I worked, my mind drifted to David. If my gamble with Sarah paid off, she might confront him, and that confrontation, I knew, would be explosive. David, cornered, scared, might do something rash. He might reveal too much, or he might dig himself deeper. I needed to anticipate his moves. Later that afternoon, the short wave crackled again. "Lenny, Art, you there? Go ahead, Lenny. I've been monitoring Thornton's comms. Or at least what I can pick up from public channels and some less public sources. He's agitated. His internal security is on high alert. Someone's poking around." My text to Sarah. It had already started. Good. That means Sarah saw the message, and she's doing something about it. Could be, or could be something else. His people are looking for a leak, an insider, someone within his financial division. And David's name has come up. Not directly, but in connection with unauthorized inquiries. Your boy might be in hot water, Art. I know. That's why I need to move fast. I'm preparing the first data drop. To Rossi at the Globe. Good. Keep hitting him. Make him desperate. Desperate men make mistakes. Lenny paused. And Art, I've been looking into those private security solutions Thornton Group offers. They're effectively a private army. Highly trained, former special forces, intelligence operatives. They operate with brutal efficiency. And they're very good at making problems disappear. I'm aware, Lenny. I've dealt with their kind before. Just keep me updated on Thornton's movements. And David's if you can. Will do. Be careful, Art. This isn't a game for old men. It's a game I invented, Lenny, and I intend to finish it. I disconnected the shortwave. The news about David confirmed my fears. He was now officially a target. My timeline had just accelerated. I had to secure him before Thornton's private security solutions decided he was a liability best eliminated. The next morning, under the cover of a pre-dawn fog, I left the cabin. I drove the truck along winding back roads, avoiding surveillance cameras, stopping only to dump the burner phone in a deep pond. I was a ghost, moving through a world that thought I was home, mourning. My target was a small public library in Salem, Massachusetts, a good 2-hour drive away. There, I would use their public computers, shielded by a VPN and a series of proxies Lenny had pre-configured to upload the anonymized files to a secure, encrypted Dropbox, the access key for which would be included in the physical package I would mail to Carla Rossi. The library was quiet, filled with the hushed rustle of turning pages and the soft glow of computer screens. I looked like any other gray-haired man, settling down to read the morning news online. But my fingers moved with a practiced, almost surgical precision, uploading the files, deleting temporary data, covering my tracks. The sheer act of taking action, of executing Eleanor's plan filled me with a cold, clear focus. Afterward, I drove to a bustling postal facility in downtown Boston. It was a chaotic scene, perfect for disappearing into the background. I mailed the package, an innocuous brown envelope from an anonymous drop box, ensuring no human interaction. The address was Carla Rossi's office at the Boston Globe. My return address was a defunct P.O. box in rural Maine. As I walked away, melting back into the urban throng, I felt a tremor of anticipation. The first blow had been struck. The fuse had been lit. Now, I waited for the explosion, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that Thornton would react. And when he did, he would reveal his hand. And that's when I would move in, not just to expose him, but to finally rescue my son from his clutches. Because a father's love, like a wife's secret life, could be a powerful and deadly force. The following days were a study in controlled tension. I stayed at the bolt hole, listening to the shortwave for Lenny's updates and scanning the news on a secured tablet for any ripple from my first strike. The world, oblivious to the seismic shift happening beneath its feet, churned on. People went to work, children went to school, politicians made speeches. But beneath the surface, a war was brewing. Lenny's reports were terse, clipped. Thornton Group internal security is in overdrive. They're locking down information, running internal audits. Panic art. It's starting. My lips curved into a grim smile. Good. Panic made people careless. Then, 3 days after I sent the package, the Boston Globe published a scathing expose. The headline screamed, "Thornton Group's Green Empire, a Toxic Facade." Carla Rossi's byline was prominent. The article meticulously detailed the shell companies, the illicit waste disposal, the environmental damage, all under the guise of ecological restoration. It wasn't the full truth, not yet, but it was a crack in Thornton's carefully constructed image. The reaction was immediate. Environmental watchdog groups demanded investigations. Politicians, suddenly eager to distance themselves from their erstwhile benefactor, called for hearings. Thornton Group's stock took a nosedive. The media firestorm had begun. This was exactly what Eleanor had planned. Not a fatal blow, but 1,000 paper cuts, each one bleeding credibility and eroding his power base. It was the slow, methodical dismantling of an empire. But with every blow I struck, the target on my back grew larger. And so did the danger to David. Art, Lenny's voice crackled through the shortwave. David's in deep. Thornton's people have him under virtual house arrest. They suspect he was the leak. Or at least, they suspect he knows who the leak is. They're squeezing him. Hard. My heart clenched. I'd gambled with my son's safety, and now the stakes were higher than ever. Any direct threats? I asked, my voice tight. Not physical yet, but implied. They've frozen his assets. Threatened to expose him for market manipulation and insider trading, which he's definitely guilty of, thanks to his initial dealings with Thornton. His career, his life, is being systematically destroyed. It's psychological warfare, Art, designed to break him. This was worse than I thought. Thornton wasn't just intimidating David. He was incinerating his life, brick by brick. And if David broke, if he pointed the finger, or if he just disappeared, it would jeopardize everything. I had to get David out, and I had to do it before he broke, or before Thornton decided he was more trouble than he was worth. My next move required a level of audacity that bordered on suicidal. I had to go to David. Not physically, not yet, but I had to reach him to tell him the truth about Eleanor, to give him a reason to fight back, to give him an out. But how do you reach a man under virtual house arrest, watched by Thornton's highly trained goons, without putting both of us at catastrophic risk? I remembered Eleanor's instructions. Use your old contacts, Art. Your network. They'll remember you. They'll help. One name came to mind. Marcus Mack Reed, a former surveillance and extraction specialist from my old unit. Mack was a master of infiltration and exfiltration, a phantom who could slip through any security net. He was retired, running a specialized security consultancy for high-net-worth individuals, mostly discreetly protecting them from paparazzi or disgruntled ex-spouses. He was expensive, but utterly reliable. And he owed me a favor. A very old, very significant favor. I pulled out an old, beat-up satellite phone, one that had been gathering dust in the bolt hole's cache for years. It was encrypted, untraceable, a direct line to a network that still existed, however tenuously. I dial Mac's secure number. It rang once, twice, then a gruff, familiar voice answered. Read security. You got trouble, you call Mac. Mac, it's Art. Silence on the other end. A long, stunned silence. Then a low chuckle. Well, I'll be damned. Art Finch, I thought you were dead, old man. Or at least, enjoying your golden years building gazebos. I'm back, Mac, and I've got trouble. Big trouble. My wife's alive, the whole world thinks she's dead, and my son is caught in a web spun by Henry Thornton. I need him out. Cleanly. Quietly. Mac's voice turned serious. Thornton? That's a whole different league, Art. His boys play rough. They don't leave witnesses. I know. That's why I called you. I need eyes and ears on David. And then, I need him extracted. From his apartment. From their surveillance. From their psychological hold. That's a tall order, Art. What's the compensation? An old debt, Mac. And a piece of the satisfaction that comes from bringing down one of the worst bastards this country has ever seen. Eleanor's got the goods. She just needs me to execute. Another pause. Mac knew Eleanor. Knew her reputation. Her quiet ferocity. And he knew my unwavering loyalty to her. All right, Art. Consider the debt called. Send me everything you have on David's location, his habits, his apartment building security, anything you know about Thornton surveillance protocols. My team will move in. But this is a high-risk extraction. There's no guarantee. There never is, Mac. Just make it happen. I spent the next few hours compiling everything Eleanor had on David's apartment, his routine, the known security measures in his building. I included every detail, every nuance, every potential blind spot. Mac was the best, but even the best needed perfect intelligence. I transmitted the encrypted data packet to Mac's secure server. Then, another agonizing wait began. But this time it was different. I wasn't just waiting for news. I was waiting for action. 2 days later, Mac called back. His voice was clipped professional. Art, we're in position. David's apartment is wired. Audio, video, data streams. His comms are fully compromised. He's a prisoner in his own home, and he's on the verge of cracking. They're playing him like a fiddle. Can you get him out? We could try, but it's going to be tricky. Their primary surveillance is external, but they've got an internal asset. A cleaner, posing as a building maintenance worker. He makes daily checks. He's their eyes and ears inside. Can you neutralize him? Non letal. We can swap him out, replace him with one of ours. Get David out during his next maintenance visit. But once he's out, Art, where do we take him? He's a high-value target, and he's going to be a loose cannon. Bring him to me, to the bolt hole. It's secure, and he needs to hear the truth. From me, from Eleanor. Mac hesitated. Putting him with you? That's risky. He's a civilian, Art. He's not built for this kind of pressure. He might not believe you. He might even try to contact Thornton. He will believe me, and he will understand. He's my son, Mac. He deserves to know what kind of mother he truly had, and what kind of father. Just get him here. All right, Art. Your call. But if he breaks, it's on you. Expect him in 48 hours. My team will handle the secure transport. He'll be disoriented, sedated, if necessary, for his own safety. I hung up, my hand shaking slightly. David, coming here, to the hidden world of his parents. The quiet life I'd built for him, for Sarah, was about to be obliterated. But it was a necessary destruction. He deserved the truth, and Eleanor deserved justice. And I was going to deliver both, even if it meant burning my own world to the ground in the process. The game had just escalated to its most personal, most dangerous level, and I was ready for it. The following days were a study in controlled tension. I stayed at the bolt hole, listening to the shortwave for Lenny's updates, and scanning the news on a secured tablet for any ripple from my first strike. The world, oblivious to the seismic shift happening beneath its feet, churned on. People went to work, children went to school, politicians made speeches. But beneath the surface, a war was brewing. Lenny's reports were terse, clipped. Thornton Group internal security is in overdrive. They're locking down information, running internal audits. Panic, Art. It's starting. My lips curved into a grim smile. Good. Panic made people careless. Then, 3 days after I sent the package, the Boston Globe published a scathing exposé. The headline screamed, "Thornton Group's Green Empire, a Toxic Facade." Carla Rossi's byline was prominent. The article meticulously detailed the shell companies, the illicit waste disposal, the environmental damage, all under the guise of ecological restoration. It wasn't the full truth, not yet, but it was a crack in Thornton's carefully constructed image. The reaction was immediate. Environmental watchdog groups demanded investigations. Politicians, suddenly eager to distance themselves from their erstwhile benefactor, called for hearings. Thornton Group's stock took a nosedive. The media firestorm had begun. This was exactly what Eleanor had planned. Not a fatal blow, but 1,000 paper cuts, each one bleeding credibility and eroding his power base. It was the slow, methodical dismantling of an empire. But with every blow I struck, the target on my back grew larger. And so did the danger to David. Art, Lenny's voice crackled through the shortwave. David's in deep. Thornton's people have him under virtual house arrest. They suspect he was the leak. Or at least, they suspect he knows who the leak is. They're squeezing him. Hard. My heart clenched. I'd gambled with my son's safety, and now the stakes were higher than ever. Any direct threats? I asked, my voice tight. Not physical yet, but implied. They've frozen his assets. Threatened to expose him for market manipulation and insider trading, which he's definitely guilty of, thanks to his initial dealings with Thornton. His career, his life, is being systematically destroyed. It's psychological warfare, Art, designed to break him. This was worse than I thought. Thornton wasn't just intimidating David. He was incinerating his life, brick by brick. And if David broke, if he pointed the finger, or if he just disappeared, it would jeopardize everything. I had to get David out, and I had to do it before he broke, or before Thornton decided he was more trouble than he was worth. My next move required a level of audacity that bordered on suicidal. I had to go to David. Not physically, not yet, but I had to reach him, to tell him the truth about Eleanor, to give him a reason to fight back, to give him an out. But how do you reach a man under virtual house arrest, watched by Thornton's highly trained goons, without putting both of us at catastrophic risk? I remembered Eleanor's instructions. Use your old contacts, Sart. Your network. They'll remember you. They'll help. One name came to mind, Marcus Mack Reed, a former surveillance and extraction specialist from my old unit. Mack was a master of infiltration and exfiltration, a phantom who could slip through any security net. He was retired, running a specialized security consultancy for high-net-worth individuals, mostly discreetly protecting them from paparazzi or disgruntled ex-spouses. He was expensive but utterly reliable, and he owed me a favor. A very old, very significant favor. I pulled out an old, beat-up satellite phone, one that had been gathering dust in the bolt hole's cache for years. It was encrypted, untraceable, a direct line to a network that still existed, however tenuously. I dialed Mac's secure number. It rang once, twice, then a gruff, familiar voice answered. Reed Security. You got trouble, you call Mac. Mac, it's Art. Silence on the other end. A long, stunned silence. Then a low chuckle. Well, I'll be damned. Art Finch. I thought you were dead, old man. Or at least, enjoying your golden years building gazebos. I'm back, Mac. And I've got trouble. Big trouble. My wife's alive, the whole world thinks she's dead, and my son is caught in a web spun by Henry Thornton. I need him out. Cleanly. Quietly. Mac's voice turned serious. Thornton? That's a whole different league, Art. His boys play rough. They don't leave witnesses. I know. That's why I called you. I need eyes and ears on David. And then, I need him extracted. From his apartment. From their surveillance. From their psychological hold. That's a tall order, Art. What's the compensation? An old debt, Mac. And a piece of the satisfaction that comes from bringing down one of the worst bastards this country has ever seen. Eleanor's got the goods. She just needs me to execute. Another pause. Mac knew Eleanor. Knew her reputation. Her quiet ferocity. And he knew my unwavering loyalty to her. All right, Art. Consider the debt called. Send me everything you have on David's location, his habits, his apartment building security, anything you know about Thornton's surveillance protocols. My team will move in. But this is a high-risk extraction. There's no guarantee. There never is, Mac. Just make it happen. I spent the next few hours compiling everything Eleanor had on David's apartment, his routine, the known security measures in his building. I included every detail, every nuance, every potential blind spot. Mac was the best, but even the best needed perfect intelligence. I transmitted the encrypted data packet to Mac's secure server. Then, another agonizing wait began. But this time it was different. I wasn't just waiting for news, I was waiting for action. 2 days later, Mac called back. His voice was clipped, professional. Art, we're in position. David's apartment is wired. Audio, video, data streams. His comms are fully compromised. He's a prisoner in his own home, and he's on the verge of cracking. They're playing him like a fiddle. Can you get him out? We could try, but it's going to be tricky. Their primary surveillance is external, but they've got an internal asset. A cleaner, posing as a building maintenance worker. He makes daily checks. He's their eyes and ears inside. Can you neutralize him? Non-lethal. We can swap him out, replace him with one of ours. Get David out during his next maintenance visit. But once he's out, Art, where do we take him? He's a high-value target, and he's going to be a loose cannon. Bring him to me, to the bolt hole. It's secure, and he needs to hear the truth. From me. From Eleanor. Mac hesitated. Putting him with you? That's risky. He's a civilian, Art. He's not built for this kind of pressure. He might not believe you. He might even try to contact Thornton. He will believe me, and he will understand. He's my son, Mac. He deserves to know what kind of mother he truly had. And what kind of father. Just get him here. All right, Art. Your call. But if he breaks, it's on you. Expect him in 48 hours. My team will handle the secure transport. He'll be disoriented, sedated, if necessary. For his own safety. I hung up, my hand shaking slightly. David, coming here, to the hidden world of his parents. The quiet life I'd built for him, for Sarah, was about to be obliterated. But it was a necessary destruction. He deserved the truth, and Eleanor deserved justice. And I was going to deliver both, even if it meant burning my own world to the ground in the process. The game had just escalated to its most personal, most dangerous level. And I was ready for it. The waiting was the hardest part. 2 days stretched into an eternity. Every rustle of leaves outside the cabin, every distant bird call, sent a jolt through me. Mac's team was the best, but even the best could be caught. And David was soft. An investment banker, not an operative. He'd never experienced this kind of pressure, this raw, existential threat. I spent the time preparing the cabin, not just for security, but for a confrontation. I pulled up Eleanor's files related to David's financial entanglements, ready to display them on the tablet. I made sure the audio file of Eleanor's message was easily accessible. I needed to hit him with the truth, hard and fast, before his fear paralyzed him completely. On the evening of the second day, a dark, unmarked SUV, mud-splattered and blending perfectly with the darkening woods, pulled up to the cabin's clearing. 2 figures emerged from the vehicle, moving with the silent efficiency of trained professionals. One was Mac. The other, a younger operative I didn't recognize, was supporting David. David looked terrible. His suit was rumpled, his face pale and drawn. His eyes were wide, unfocused, betraying the residual effects of sedation. He stumbled, leaning heavily on the operative, looking more like a prisoner than a rescued man. He was far from the sharp, ambitious banker I knew. He was a broken shell. Art, Max said, his voice low, his eyes sweeping the perimeter. He's here, barely conscious. No incidents on extraction, but he's been through the ringer. Psychologically, they really worked him over. I walked towards them, my gaze fixed on David. A pang of raw paternal guilt twisted in my gut. This was my world, my wife's world, that had consumed him. Bring him inside. I ordered, my voice firm. They guided David into the cabin, settling him gently onto the old, worn couch near the fireplace. Mac's operative, a young woman named Riley, checked his pulse, her movements swift and professional. He'll be groggy for a few more hours, Riley reported. Minimal dose, but enough to keep him compliant for transport. He's going to be confused when he comes around. Thank you, Riley. Mac, wait for me outside. Keep watch. Mac nodded, gave me a meaningful look, and then he and Riley melted back into the shadows outside the cabin. I was alone with my son. I pulled up a chair, facing David, letting the silence settle around us. The only sound was the crackle of the small fire I'd lit, its warmth doing little to thaw the cold fear radiating from my son. I watched him, memorizing the subtle twitch of his eyelid, the shallow rise and fall of his chest. This was the moment of truth. It was nearly an hour before David's eyes flickered open fully. He blinked, his gaze slowly traversing the unfamiliar cabin. He saw the rugged wood, the worn furniture, the old rifles mounted on the wall. His expression was a mixture of confusion, fear, and disbelief. And his eyes locked on me. "Dad?" He rasped, his voice hoarse, disbelieving. What is this place? Where am I? What happened?" He tried to sit up, but his limbs still felt heavy, unresponsive. Panic began to rise in his eyes. "You're safe, David," I said, my voice calm, unwavering. "You're in a place no one knows about, and you're with me." "Safe? Dad, Thornton, they had me. They were going to ruin me. My career, everything. Who are you people? How'd I get here?" His voice rose, tinged with a desperate edge. Did you kidnap me?" I let him vent, letting the residual fear and confusion bleed out. It was necessary. He had to hit rock bottom before he could accept the lifeline I was offering. "David," I said, cutting through his rising panic. "Listen to me, carefully. Everything you think you know, it's a lie, or a partial truth, fed to you by people who used you. And your mother, she's not dead." His eyes, still cloudy with drugs and terror, widened. "What were you talking about?" Mom's gone, Dad. We buried her. You were there. I saw it." His voice was tinged with a new horror, a disbelief that bordered on madness. "We buried a casket, David, but your mother wasn't in it." I reached for the tablet, my fingers moving quickly. "She's alive, and she sent me a message." I played the audio file. Eleanor's voice, clear and resonant, filled the small cabin. Her initial tender words, then her calm, unwavering explanation of the Ghost Protocol, the John Doe, the need to protect us, to expose Thornton. David listened, his jaw slack, his eyes fixed on the tablet in my hands. His face drained of all color, turning ashen. When her voice spoke of him, of his unwitting role, of her love for him despite his predicament, a single tear traced a path down his cheek. The recording ended. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the crackle of the fire. "No," David whispered, the word barely audible. "No, this is impossible. It's a trick. Thornton, this is one of their mind games, isn't it, Dad? Trying to break me, to make me confess something." He looked at me, a flicker of suspicion in his eyes. "Are you working with them, Dad? Is this some kind of setup?" "No, David. This is the truth. Your mother, she was an operative, a nightingale. She had a hidden life, and she was going after Thornton because he's a cancer, infecting everything he touches." I paused, then hit him with the cold, hard facts. "And you, son, you got caught in his net. You were his unwitting informant. He used your ambition, your debts. He squeezed you, manipulated you, and made you believe your own mother was a criminal. He set you up to be the fall guy, to take the blame for his financial schemes, and to be a witness against your mother if she ever resurfaced. He was going to destroy you, David, either by exposing you or by making you disappear when you outlived your usefulness." I pulled up the files on the tablet, the detailed accounts, the shell companies, the specific transactions linking him to Thornton's illicit activities. Eleanor's meticulous notes, outlining how David was being used, how his assets were frozen, how he was being psychologically broken. David stared at the screen, his eyes scanning the data. His banker's brain, despite the lingering sedation, began to process, to recognize the names, the numbers, the damning evidence. The color slowly returned to his face, replaced by a flush of shame and a raw, sickening realization. "Horizon Holdings, LLC," he murmured, his voice hollow. They told me it was a legitimate holding company for discreet investments. They showed me records, made it look like Mom was involved in something illegal. They twisted everything. His hands clenched into fists, trembling. They lied. They used me. They made me betray her. His eyes, no longer unfocused, now burned with a new fire. Not just fear, but a searing, agonizing rage. Rage at Thornton, at himself, at the shattered reality he was now forced to confront. They made you believe she was dead, David. They wanted her silenced. Permanently. Because she had the proof. The proof that could bring down his entire empire. And she's trusting me, trusting us, to finish what she started. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a low, intense whisper. You have a choice now, son. You can let this destroy you. Let Thornton win. Or you can fight back. You can help me bring him down. For Eleanor. For your own redemption. And to make sure no one else suffers at his hands. David looked at me, his gaze fierce, finally seeing me not as a grieving father or a kidnapper, but as a man who knew things, a man with a purpose. He saw the steel in my eyes, the cold, calculating resolve he'd never known I possessed. What do you want to do, Dad? He asked, his voice still raw, but firm. The broken shell was beginning to harden, to rebuild itself, not as the ambitious banker, but as a son who had lost everything and found a new, terrifying truth. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched my lips. The trap was sprung. My son was no longer a pawn. He was a weapon, and he was ready to aim. I want you to help me expose him, David. Piece by agonizing piece. You know his financial dealings better than anyone. You know the dark corners of his empire. You know how to hurt him where it counts. And you're going to use all of that against him. He nodded, a fierce determination replacing the last vestiges of fear in his eyes. He's going to pay for this, Dad. For Mom. For me. For all of it. That's the spirit, son. But this isn't about revenge. It's about justice. And it's about surviving. You're no longer just my son, David. You're an operative. And our target is Henry Thornton. Welcome to the family business. The quiet contractor and his ambitious banker son. An unlikely duo. But we were united by a common enemy, by a shared betrayal, and by the ghost of a woman who was anything but ordinary. The game had truly begun. And with David now on my side, I knew Thornton's empire was about to crumble. David's transformation wasn't instantaneous, but it was absolute. The initial shock, the raw shame, slowly gave way to a cold, burning fury. He devoured Eleanor's files, his banker's mind quickly grasping the intricate web of deception and corruption she had laid bare. He saw the full extent of Thornton's depravity, not just as an abstract evil, but as a personal violation, a deliberate campaign to destroy his life and reputation. He didn't just use me, Dad, David said one morning, his voice tight with controlled rage as he stared at the tablet. He played me for a fool. He made me complicit. He made me doubt Mom. He's going to pay. My son, the ambitious banker, was now Art Finch's operative. His analytical skills, his understanding of financial markets, his insider knowledge of Thornton's corporate structure, these were invaluable tools. He knew the pressure points, the vulnerabilities, the hidden leverage points. Revenge is a powerful motivator, son, I replied, cleaning a vintage hunting rifle, a deliberate gesture to remind him of the stakes. But control your anger. Let it fuel you, but don't let it blind you. Thornton thrives on chaos and emotional reactions. We need precision. We need strategy. Like your mother. He nodded, his gaze hardening. Understand, Dad. What's the next move? Our next target was Thornton's Project Chimera. This was Eleanor's most explosive file, detailing Thornton Group's involvement in illicit data mining, pervasive surveillance of political figures, and the manipulation of public opinion through sophisticated disinformation campaigns. It wasn't just about money. It was about power and control over the very fabric of American democracy. This was the heart of the beast. Eleanor had identified a specific, highly reputable tech journalist, Ethan Vance at Wired magazine, as the ideal recipient for this data. Vance was known for his in-depth investigations into corporate malfeasance in the tech sector and his unwavering ethical stance. This is riskier than the last one, David, I explained, outlining the plan. Thornton's security will be doubled after the Globe expose. They'll be actively looking for a leak, especially within their tech division. We need to be invisible. David, now fully engaged, saw the challenge. I know a few vulnerabilities in their digital infrastructure, Dad. Minor ones, usually dismissed as legacy code or redundant systems. But they could be entry points. They would never expect anyone to use them for an external hack. This was David's true strength. His unique insights into the enemy's system. Good, I said. Lenny will coordinate the digital drop. You'll provide him with the specific vulnerabilities. I'll handle the physical dead drop for a backup. But we need to make sure this looks like an internal leak from someone deeply embedded, someone with direct access to Project Chimera. David's mind was already at work. I can craft a convincing digital trail, Dad. Enough to point suspicion at one of their mid-level VPs, a man named Jeremy Stone. He's ambitious, slightly reckless, and he recently had a falling out with Thornton over a promotion. He'd be a plausible scapegoat. My son was learning quickly. This was not just about exposing the truth. It was about weaponizing it, directing suspicion, creating maximum damage with minimum direct exposure. Lenny, now fully aware of David's involvement, provided the necessary technical support. He set up a series of anonymous servers, routing the data through a labyrinth of international proxies, making it virtually untraceable back to us. The digital package to Ethan Vance included carefully curated excerpts from Project Chimera, designed to be undeniable, yet to leave enough questions to fuel Vance's investigative instincts. Meanwhile, I prepared my own physical dead drop, a backup in case the digital one was intercepted or failed. This involved another anonymous package, a burner phone for me, and a meticulous multi-state road trip to mail it from a location far removed from any known association. 2 weeks passed. The greenwash scandal continued to simmer, but Thornton's PR machine was working overtime to contain the damage, issuing carefully worded denials and promising internal investigations. It was a holding action, buying him time. Then, Wire magazine hit. The headline was a chilling declaration. The Panopticon Project, how the Thornton Group is building a private surveillance state. Ethan Vance's article was a tour de force, exposing the sophisticated data mining operations, the AI-driven disinformation campaigns, the covert surveillance of journalists, activists, and even elected officials. It directly implicated Jeremy Stone, the VP David had singled out, making him the convenient fall guy. The world erupted. Unlike the environmental expose, this touched a nerve deep within the American psyche: privacy, freedom, and the integrity of democratic processes. The FBI launched an immediate investigation. Congress announced emergency hearings. The Department of Justice initiated a criminal probe. Thornton Group's stock plummeted further, and several key investors began to pull out, sensing a sinking ship. Thornton's losing control, Art, Lenny reported, a note of satisfaction in his voice. He's raging. His PR team is in shambles, and his internal security is tearing itself apart looking for the leak. Stone was arrested this morning. They think they got their man. They thought wrong. I replied, a cold smile on my face. What about Sarah? She's been asking questions, Art. About David. About Eleanor. She read the Wired article. She's starting to connect the dots. She's concerned. And she's smart. She's going to keep digging. This was both a relief and a new source of worry. Sarah was getting closer to the truth, and that put her in increasing danger. But for now, my priority was Thornton. David, watching the news coverage, was a man reborn. The fear had been entirely replaced by a steely resolve. He was no longer just helping me. He was an active participant, fully invested in dismantling the man who had ruined his life and threatened his family. "What's next, Dad?" he asked, his eyes gleaming with a fierce intensity. "Next," I said, pointing to another file on Eleanor's tablet, "is his military contracts. The billions siphoned from black-budget projects, the substandard equipment, the inflated costs, the lives put at risk. This will be the final blow to his public image, his government contracts. It will sever his ties to the military-industrial complex that protects him. And this one needs to go to a very specific target." Eleanor had identified Senator Margaret Thorne, a formidable, incorruptible senator on the Senate Armed Services Committee, known for her relentless pursuit of accountability in defense spending. She was a bulldog, and once she sank her teeth into something, she never let go. This one, David, is where we expose the sheer criminal negligence, the betrayal of the public trust. It needs to be undeniable beyond any PR spin, and it needs to be delivered directly to Senator Thorne, discreetly, anonymously, and with a guarantee of authenticity. David nodded, already strategizing. We need to authenticate the documents, Dad, and make it look like it comes from a disgruntled high-level military source, not just a random leak. Exactly, I confirmed. Eleanor had a few such sources. Retired generals, disillusioned officers. She left a paper trail, encrypted of course, to suggest one of them as the source. Lenny will help us with the digital component. But the delivery is crucial. It needs to be undeniable. Our plan began to coalesce. This time, David would be more directly involved. He would craft the digital package, embedding a series of cryptographic keys that would authenticate the documents directly to Senator Thorne's secure servers, making them appear to come from a highly cleared, internal source within the Pentagon itself. I, meanwhile, would prepare a physical dead drop, once again a ghost in the machine, ensuring the information reached Thorne's office directly. The fight was escalating, the stakes growing higher with each passing day. Thornton was wounded, thrashing, and dangerous. But he was also cornered, and a cornered animal, while deadly, often makes the most desperate, and therefore the most predictable, mistakes. I felt Eleanor's presence, her quiet determination, guiding my hand. We were not just her proxies, we were her legacy. And Thornton was about to learn that some ghosts, once awakened, could never be put back to rest. The bull hole had become our war room. David, sharp-eyed and energized by purpose, was no longer the pampered Boston banker. He was a man consumed by a cold, righteous anger, working tirelessly beside me, poring over Eleanor's files. His meticulous mind, once focused on leveraging financial assets, was now expertly dissecting Thornton's illicit military contracts, codenamed Project Manticore. "Dad, look at this," David said, pointing at the tablet. "They're not just siphoning funds. They're deliberately procuring substandard equipment for critical defense systems. Faulty comms, compromised encryption for frontline units. They're putting soldiers' lives at risk to cut costs and funnel the difference into offshore accounts. This isn't just corruption, it's treason." His voice was laced with disgust. This was the kind of betrayal that struck at the core of national pride, at the very idea of duty and sacrifice. This would be the most damaging blow yet. Eleanor always knew this would be the final nail in his coffin. I murmured, my gaze fixed on the complex schematics of a supposed next-gen fighter jet, riddled with glaring, intentionally designed flaws. This doesn't just hit his pocketbook, David. It hits his patriotism, his reputation, everything he uses to hide behind. Our target was Senator Margaret Thorne, a woman known for her iron will and bulldog tenacity in defense oversight. Eleanor had cultivated a specific approach for her. Undeniable proof, meticulously authenticated and delivered in a way that screamed insider. David's expertise was crucial here. To make this credible to Thorne, Dad, it can't just be a leak. It needs to appear as if it comes from a high-clearance military source, someone disillusioned, someone with direct access to these programs. We need to mimic their internal reporting structure, their authentication protocols. Lenny, a silent digital ghost, provided the necessary tools. He helped David craft a complex data package, encrypted files, digitally signed with forged credentials that mimicked a disgruntled Pentagon analyst. The package was designed to unravel layer by layer, revealing its authenticity only to Thorne's most trusted security experts, making it impossible to dismiss as disinformation. My role was the physical delivery. A ghost in the machine wasn't enough for Senator Thorne. She needed to feel the weight of physical evidence, the gravity of the betrayal. I planned a trip to Washington, D.C., a risky venture, exposing myself to a city crawling with government security and Thornton's paid thugs. but it was necessary. I packed a discreet, anonymized hard drive containing a backup of the Manicord data, along with a carefully crafted, handwritten letter from a fictitious, anguished senior officer pleading for justice. I used a network of safe houses and dead drops on the way, changing vehicles, ditching surveillance, moving with the practiced fluidity of a man who knew how to disappear. The day of the drop, I was a phantom in the bustling halls of Capitol Hill. Dressed in a nondescript suit, my face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat and glasses, I looked like one of the thousands of lobbyists or constituents milling about. My target was Senator Thorne's personal office. Not the mailroom, not a general drop box. Her desk. I studied the security, the patrol routes, the blind spots. Years of training, of observing, of dissecting human behavior clicked into place. I found my window. A few seconds, a momentary lapse in vigilance by a security guard, a brief distraction by a noisy tour group. With the hard drive tucked into an inner pocket and the letter folded neatly, I slipped into the office building. I timed my approach to Thorne's office to coincide with a shift change and a coffee run. I entered calm, collected. A young intern sat at the front desk, momentarily distracted by his phone. I moved quickly, unseen, placing the package discreetly on Thorne's personal desk, underneath a stack of official documents. No lingering, no glances. Just a silent, efficient delivery. I was out of the building, melting back into the D.C. crowds, before the intern even looked up. The adrenaline coursed through me, cold and sharp. The third blow had been struck. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. 2 days later, a news bulletin flashed across the screen of my secured tablet. Senator Thorne demands emergency hearings on DoD contracts, citing grave national security breaches by Thornton Group. The accompanying article, vague in its details but scathing in its implications, revealed that Thorne had been presented with unassailable evidence of systemic fraud and criminal negligence. Thornton Group stock cratered, losing billions in a single day. Their government contracts were immediately frozen. Key executives resigned in disgrace, one even being arrested at the airport trying to flee the country. The FBI, already investigating the Panopticon project, expanded its probe, now calling for the arrest of Henry Thornton himself. The empire was not just cracking, it was collapsing. He's cornered Art. Lenny's voice crackled, barely concealing his satisfaction. His private army is activating. They're not just looking for a leak anymore. They're looking for you. And for Eleanor. I know, I replied, my gaze sweeping the perimeter of the bolt hole. He's going to lash out. What about Sarah? She's gone to the house, Art. Your old house. She went there after Thorne's announcement. She seems to be looking for something. Something of Eleanor's. My blood ran cold. The house. The place Thornton's men would undoubtedly sweep for any trace of me or Eleanor. Sarah was walking into a hornet's nest. Lenny, can you track her? Put eyes on her, if possible. Already on it, Art. I have a few old assets in the area, but they're not as fast as Thornton's people. He's putting out feelers for you. A massive bounty. And he's desperate. He's calling in every favor. My fear for Sarah eclipsed everything else. David, seeing my face, understood immediately. He's coming for us, Dad, isn't he? David said, his voice grim. And he's going to use Sarah to get to us. Precisely, I confirmed, already moving, grabbing a duffel bag, checking my old Sig Sauer, cleaning it meticulously. He's lost everything. He has nothing left to lose. And that makes him the most dangerous kind of enemy. I looked at David. Eleanor left a red button file. A failsafe. A complete, unadulterated data dump, meant to go viral, to hit every major news outlet, every government agency, every dark corner of the internet. It will burn his empire to the ground, but it will also expose a lot of secrets, including some of ours. David's eyes widened. The nuclear option. Are we there yet? Almost. If Sarah is compromised, if we can't get her out, then we hit the button. We ensure he goes down, no matter the cost. My voice was grim. But first, we save your sister. Lenny's voice crackled, filled with urgency. Art, I've got eyes on the house. Sarah just found something. A hidden compartment behind the fireplace. Eleanor's journals. A Thornton Group security detail is en route. They'll be there in 15 minutes. 15 minutes. Not enough time to get there, but enough time to make a difference. David, I commanded, my mind racing. Call Sarah. Give her instructions. Quickly. Tell her to take the journals. Tell her to leave a message for the security detail. Something that will buy us time. Something that will make them hesitate. David, his face pale but determined, grabbed his secure sat phone. He was no longer just an operative. He was a brother fighting for his sister. As he frantically dialed, I grabbed the tablet, my fingers flying. The red button file. I had to be ready. If Sarah was captured, if she became a tool against us, then I would unleash the digital apocalypse. Thornton had pushed us to the brink, and he was about to learn that when you threaten my family, there are no limits to what I will do. The quiet contractor was gone. Only the ghost remained, and he was ready to haunt Thornton's final moments. David's hands, usually so steady when manipulating complex financial models, trembled as he fumbled with his satellite phone. His face was a mask of stark terror, fear for his sister overriding his newfound rage. He punched in Sarah's number, his knuckles white. "Sarah, pick up. For God's sake, pick up," he pleaded, his voice hoarse. The seconds stretched agonizingly. I stood over him, the Sig Sauer in my hand, my own heart hammering. Every part of me screamed to go, to drive to that house, but I knew it was a fool's errand. I couldn't get there in time. My only hope was David and Sarah's quick thinking. Then, a relieved gasp from David. "Sarah, thank God. Listen to me. Carefully. Don't ask questions. Just listen. Our old house, it's not safe. Thornton's men are coming. They'll be there in minutes." He paused, listening to Sarah's frantic questions, then cut her off. "No time, Sarah. Mom's journals. You found them, right? Good. You need to get out. Immediately. Take the journals. All of them. There's a hidden compartment behind the loose brick in the old fireplace in Mom's study. Put them there. Just the journals. And then get out. Get to the car. Drive as fast as you can. Don't look back. Don't stop for anything." He was giving her a partial truth, an old cover. The loose brick was a detail Eleanor had used as a child to hide trinkets, a place David would know, but also a place too obvious for true secret-keeping. It would appear as a hurried attempt to hide, not a carefully constructed dead drop. It was a decoy. "And Sarah," David continued, his voice dropping, "leave a message. For them. Something in plain sight. On the desk, near the fireplace. Right. The real leak is not stone. He's a scapegoat. The rot is within. Check Project Medusa. Then get out. Don't wait. Go." He snapped the phone shut, his eyes wide. "She heard me, Dad. I think she got it. Project Medusa. A new code name. One Eleanor hadn't given me details on, but one David, from his time within Thornton's financial orbit, must have gleaned. Something that would send them chasing their own tails, creating internal chaos. It was a brilliant, desperate stroke. My mind raced. "Lenny," I barked into the shortwave. "Mac's team, are they still in the area?" "Negative, Art. They're already halfway to the designated exfil point with David's transport. No time to reroute. Sarah's on her own for a clean run." Damn it. We were counting on Sarah's wits and the distraction David had just created. I activated Eleanor's tablet, bringing up the red button file. My thumb hovered over the activation sequence. This was it. If Sarah didn't make it out, if those journals were compromised, if she was caught, then I would burn Thornton's world to ashes. No more precision, just scorched earth. The minutes crawled by, each one an eternity. The cabin felt suffocating. I paced, the cold metal of the Sig Sauer, a familiar weight in my hand. David sat slumped on the couch, head in his hands, muttering to himself, "Come on, Sarah. Just run. Run." Then, Lenny's voice, a static-laced lifeline. "Art, status update on the house. Thornton security detail, they just arrived. 3 vehicles, 12 men, heavily armed. They're breaching the house now." My thumb pressed harder on the tablet screen. "Sarah." No visual on Sarah leaving the house, Art. But wait. I'm picking up an alert. A car. Sarah's car. It just exited the driveway, driving at high speed. Looks like she made it out. Barely. A raw, shaky breath escaped me. She made it. She ran. She listened to her brother. Thank God. And the house, Lenny? The journals? They're inside. I'm seeing internal thermal scans. They're sweeping the house, looking for you, Art, and Eleanor. And they're converging on the study, on the fireplace. A moment of intense silence. Then, Lenny's voice again, a wry chuckle underlying his words. They just found the note, Art, and the hidden journals. My lips curved into a slow, grim smile. David's decoy worked. Their comms are lighting up, Art. Panic. Confusion. They're arguing amongst themselves. Project Medusa has them spooked. And the claim that Jeremy Stone was a scapegoat. It's causing a major internal shit show. They're questioning everything, everyone. Your son just bought us some serious time, Art. And he just sowed some serious distrust in Thornton's inner circle. I closed the red button file, the screen going dark. The immediate threat to Sarah was averted. The journals, carefully placed in an obvious but not too obvious spot, would be seized by Thornton's men. They would contain enough real, but not immediately catastrophic, information to make them believe they had found Eleanor's true cache. They would spend days, weeks, months trying to decipher what they thought were the real secrets, chasing false leads planted within them. And David's coded message about Project Medusa, about a leak within, would tear them apart from the inside. It was a masterstroke of psychological warfare, courtesy of my son. What about Sarah? I asked Lenny. She's clear of the immediate area. I'm rerouting one of Mac's support teams, the one that dropped David's transport, to intercept her. They'll get her to a secure location. She's shaken, but safe. A profound wave of relief washed over me. Both my children were safe. For now. And they were both, in their own ways, now part of the fight. I looked at David. His face, still pale, was now etched with a triumphant, albeit exhausted, grin. We got her out, Dad. And we messed with them. We did, son. You did good. I put a hand on his shoulder, a rare, paternal gesture that spoke volumes. But this isn't over. Not by a long shot. Thornton's desperate now. He's going to come for us. Directly. The collapse of his empire was now undeniable. The greenwash scandal, the Panopticon expose, the military contract revelations, they had utterly annihilated his public image and his vast network of influence. His government contracts were gone, his investors fleeing. He was a cornered rat, stripped of his power, his reputation, his legitimacy. He had nothing left but his private army and his desperate, ruthless desire for revenge. What's the final step, Dad? David asked, his eyes gleaming with a fierce, almost terrifying determination. The final step, David, is to cut off the head of the snake. We go after Thornton himself. He'll be trying to escape, to salvage what he can. He'll be consolidating his remaining assets, preparing to disappear. I walked to a large map of the eastern seaboard I had pinned to the wall, Eleanor's annotations marking various Thornton Group assets and properties. And he'll be looking for Eleanor. He still thinks she's the primary threat. My finger traced a path to a remote, heavily fortified estate in rural Vermont. Eleanor had marked it as Thornton's personal sanctuary, his final bolt hole. He's going to run to his fortress, his final bastion of control. I continued. And that's where we meet him. We take him out of play. Permanently. I looked at David, my gaze unwavering. This is the culmination, son. The final act. You ready? David met my gaze, a cold, hard resolve in his eyes. Ready, Dad. He's going to regret ever crossing our family. The quiet contractor, the ambitious banker, and the ghost of a librarian. We were a formidable force, driven by loss, betrayal, and an unshakable belief in justice. Henry Thornton had underestimated us all, and he was about to pay the ultimate price. The stage was set for the final confrontation. The Vermont woods in late autumn are a symphony of muted colors and biting cold. Bare branches, skeletal against the bruised sky, scraped at the side of the unmarked van we were driving. Another acquisition from Mac's network, sanitized and off-book. Inside, the air was thick with tension, the hum of the engine a constant, low thrum against our racing hearts. David sat beside me, his face grim, a tablet displaying the schematics of Thornton's fortified estate glowing faintly in the dim interior. His private fortress, Dad, David murmured, pointing to a section of the map. High walls, motion sensors, IR tripwires, armed patrols every 15 minutes. And, according to Eleanor's intel, an internal security team of at least 20 heavily armed operatives, ex-military, former intelligence. This isn't a vacation home. It's a goddamn bunker. He built it to protect himself from the world, I replied, my eyes scanning the map, identifying weaknesses, potential entry points. Now it's his cage, and we're the ones rattling the bars. Lenny, a disembodied voice crackling over the secured comms, had provided critical updates. Thornton's consolidating art, pulling in every last resource. He's planning to vanish. Has a private jet on standby, a small airstrip nearby. He's buying time, trying to move his remaining untraceable assets. If you don't hit him now, he'll be gone. A ghost. Not before we make him one, I promised. My plan wasn't about brute force. It was about precision, psychological warfare, and exploiting the chaos we had already sown within his organization. Thornton's men were jumpy, distrustful, riddled with paranoia thanks to David's Project Medusa decoy. They were looking for traitors within, not a quiet old man and his frantic son crashing their gates. The main gate, I instructed David, pointing to a pixelated image on the tablet. It's reinforced, but the biometric scanner has an override. Eleanor noted it. A specific sequence of tones and a frequency burst designed to fool the system into thinking it's an authorized scan. Lenny's transmitting the sequence now. David nodded, his fingers flying over a custom-built interface Lenny had provided. His technical skills were impressive, honed by years of navigating complex digital systems. He was not just my son. He was my primary support, my eyes and ears in the digital realm. We parked the van miles from the estate, deep in the woods, covering it with camouflage netting. The cold bit at our faces as we moved through the dense forest, clad in dark, insulated gear. My Sig Sauer felt light and balanced in my hand, a familiar extension of my will. David, surprisingly, was carrying a suppressed Glock, a weapon he'd never touched before this. He learned quickly. Remember the objective, David, I whispered, our breath pluming in the frigid air. Get to Thornton, secure the remaining evidence, and find Eleanor, if she's there. No necessity casualties. But if they engage, you do what you have to do. Understood, Dad, he replied, his voice firm. His gaze was no longer soft. It was hard, focused. We approached the perimeter from the south, a blind spot Eleanor had identified years ago during her initial surveillance. The air was still, broken only by the crunch of frozen leaves underfoot. We moved like shadows, ghosts in the forest. The outer wall was higher than I remembered. Lenny, status on the main gate override? I whispered into my comms. Sequence initiated, Art. Give it 10 seconds. The system will register a ghost entry. Security cameras will show a glitch, a momentary blur. Then it'll reset. Sure enough, a faint hum reached us from the main gate. On David's tablet, the gate's status shifted from locked to open for a split second, then back to locked. The cameras flickered. It was enough. David, you're up. The internal network. Take it down. Not completely, just enough to sow confusion. Disable the comms for 5 minutes in the East Wing. Make them think it's an internal systems failure. And create a diversion. Understood, Dad. Planting a ghost network intrusion in their server farm, East Wing, should trigger localized alarms and divert a patrol. David's fingers danced over his tablet. A few minutes later, a distant wail of an alarm echoed from the East Wing of the fortress. Flashing lights painted the night sky. I could hear the distant shouts of men, the rumble of an approaching vehicle. Perfect. Go, Art, David urged, already moving. I'll follow your lead. We scaled the wall, using a grappling hook I'd retrieved from the cabin, a forgotten tool from a forgotten life. Once over, we moved swiftly, using the shadows cast by the fortress's imposing architecture to our advantage. The internal security was in disarray, responding to David's diversion. Their formation was broken, their focus fractured. We navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the estate, guided by Eleanor's detailed schematics on David's tablet. My senses were heightened, every sound, every shadow, a potential threat. We cleared a long, deserted hallway, Our footsteps muffled. Then, a sudden clatter from a side room. A scuffle. A muffled cry. I froze, motioning David to stay back. My heart pounded. This wasn't part of the plan. This was organic and deadly. I moved to the door, pressing myself against the wall, listening. Muffled voices. One I recognized, Thornton. His voice, usually so smooth, was now ragged, desperate. And another, a woman's voice. Sharp, defiant. My blood ran cold. Eleanor. I kicked the door open, the sound echoing through the opulent room. It was Thornton's private study, filled with rich mahogany, leather-bound books, and a grand fireplace. Henry Thornton stood over a bound figure on the floor, his face contorted in a sneer, a pistol in his hand. And the bound figure was Eleanor. She looked different. Older, perhaps, with lines of fatigue around her eyes. But her gaze was still defiant, blazing with an inner fire. She saw me, and a flicker of relief, quickly masked, crossed her face. Thornton spun around, startled, his pistol swinging towards me. His eyes, usually cold and calculating, were now wide with a desperate, animalistic rage. "Finch, you bastard. You just won't die, will you? Just like her," he snarled, his voice thick with venom. "You ruined everything. My empire. My life." David, close behind me, leveled his Glock. "Drop it, Thornton," he commanded, his voice surprisingly steady. Thornton laughed, a chilling, humorless sound. "Look at this. The simple contractor and his spoiled brat of a son. Coming to play hero? You're too late. I have her, and I have the real red button. The one that will expose all of you. Every dirty little secret your darling wife accumulated over her miserable career." He gestured to a large, ornate safe built into the wall. My gaze locked with Eleanor's. She shook her head almost imperceptibly, a silent message. "He's bluffing. The real red button is secure." "It's over, Thornton," I said, my voice calm, unwavering. "Your empire is crumbling. Your people are betraying you. You have nowhere left to run. I'll take you all down with me," he roared, raising his pistol, not at me, but at Eleanor. She thought she could hide. She thought she could win. But I knew she'd come back for something. For her journals. For her proof. He was frantic, unhinged. "He's got nothing, Art," Eleanor called out, her voice clear despite her binds. "He's desperate. He got a message, a trap you set. He thought I'd stored my real data here, in his safe. He's been torturing me for the codes, for the location of the real red button. But he only found old dead drop locations, decoys. He knows nothing." Thornton's face twisted further. "Lies. She's lying. I know she has it. I know she's behind it all. I knew what she was doing. She was baiting him, making him reveal his true state of mind. A cornered, paranoid animal. "You're finished, Thornton," I repeated, my voice like ice. "The world knows what you are. The truth is out, and your time is up." He screamed a raw, inarticulate sound of pure rage and turned the pistol towards me, his finger tightening on the trigger. But before he could fire, David, moving with a speed I didn't know he possessed, lunged. He didn't aim to shoot. He aimed to disarm. He tackled Thornton, sending both men crashing to the floor. The pistol skittered across the polished wood, sliding under a heavy armchair. A move covering them. Thornton, older and less agile, struggled against David's surprisingly strong grip. My son, the banker, was fighting for his life and for his mother. Just as I reached them, a new sound echoed from the hallway outside. Heavy boots, angry shouts. His remaining security detail. They had finally converged. "Incoming!" I barked, grabbing Thornton, wrenching him to his feet. "Eleanor, can you move?" "Just untie me, Art," she gasped, her eyes fixed on the door. "I'm fine." David, now recovered, quickly moved to untie his mother. As the door burst open, revealing 3 heavily armed men, I used Thornton as a human shield, pushing him forward. "Hold your fire." Thornton screamed, his voice shaking. "Don't shoot. It's me." The security men hesitated, confused. It was the moment of weakness, the crack in their discipline. "Lenny now," I roared into my comms. A deafening, high-pitched shriek blasted from the speakers within the study. a pre-programmed sonic attack designed by Lenny to disorient and overwhelm. The security men clutched their ears, their weapons wavering. Eleanor, now free, moved with astonishing speed, snatching Thornton's dropped pistol from under the armchair. She didn't aim to kill. She aimed to neutralize. A swift, precise blow to the head with the butt of the weapon, and Thornton slumped to the floor, unconscious. "Your final gift, Henry," Eleanor murmured, looking down at his inert form. A long, cold sleep. As the security men reeled from the sonic assault, I opened fire, not to kill, but to incapacitate, aiming for their legs, their weapon hands. My shots were precise, practiced. 2 men went down, screaming. The third, disoriented, dropped his weapon, eyes wide with terror. "It's over," I said, my voice echoing in the sudden silence. "Stand down or die." He raised his hands, shaking. David, Eleanor, and I stood together, an unlikely, reunited family, facing down the last vestiges of a dying empire. The quiet contractor, the hidden agent, and the ambitious son, now warriors in a war for truth and justice. "Are you all right, my love?" I asked Eleanor, my voice thick with emotion, the rifle still pointed at the remaining guard. She met my gaze, a soft, weary smile gracing her lips. "Never better, Art. Never better. Just glad to be home." David, his face streaked with dirt and exhaustion, looked at his mother, then at me. His eyes, for the first time in weeks, were clear. And in them, I saw not just a son, but a man who had faced the darkness and chosen the light. The rest was cleanup. Lenny coordinated with Mac's teams to secure the fortress, capture the remaining operatives, and seize Thornton's servers, which still contained a trove of incriminating data. Senator Thorne's office was immediately notified, and the full weight of federal law enforcement descended upon the Vermont estate. Henry Thornton, when he finally awoke, was in a holding cell, stripped of his power, his wealth, and his carefully constructed image. His empire was shattered. Justice, in its slow, relentless way, had finally arrived. But for us, the quiet contractor and his secret agent wife, life would never be the same.